The original name of the theater was the Academy of Music Theater. But over time, because it's been here since 1905, the sort of short name has become the Academy. And then to make it more complex, the organization is the Academy Center of the Arts, which was named after the original theater. And so now, just to shorten it, we just say the Historic Academy Theater. In this first year of theater being open, we're still figuring out too what is the right thing to call it, because it has all of these associations. The theater was originally built in 1905, so and that theater had a local architect, and Richard D. Apperson, who ran a rail line that ran through the city, as well as ran the electric company for the city. Decided he wanted to lead the charge of Lynchburg having what they called at that time an opera house. And it was also on a rail line that led from a neighborhood that he was living in, and so he had ways of bringing people directly here. And it was also the first public space in Lynchburg to have electricity, because he ran the electric company. So from 1905 through 1911, it operated, was fully functional, and a fire broke out in 1911 in the space. And the theater was severely damaged, and the community had a moment where they had to make a decision about whether they were just going to tear the building down or whether they were going to rebuild it. And it mirrors a little bit of some of the dialogue that was going on for us really in the present moment in bringing the theater back, and the importance of the arts, and why having a cultural center for a city is really, really important. So they made this decision to rebuild it, and not just rebuild it, but ramp it up. So they hired C.K. Howell, who is a national architect. As a matter of fact, he has some of his theaters are in Richmond. The theater that Virginia Rep is in, their larger theater, is actually a C.K. Howell theater. So C.K. Howell came in. They also at that moment turned a manager's apartment into a second balcony, so it became a three-leveled space. And it became a Beaux-Arts style theater. And so from 1912, really through up until the 1930s, it was a really vibrant theater. This was a major vaudeville stop. We were on a major rail line here, and really second really to Richmond in terms of vaudeville acts stopping here. So a lot of major acts of that time came through. 1930s, same thing for Lynchburg, and a theater here as in most of the nation. Film was really taking over as a popular medium. And there was actually a huge theater. The Paramount was across the street from here. A big movie palace was built. And so it started becoming a second-run movie house. We have here in the lobby these Art Deco chandeliers that were originally placed in the theater in the 1930s. And they've been refurbished and placed here to hold on to them because they're really beautiful pieces. So the 1930s up until the 1950s really became a second-run movie house. Most of the people alive today who remember the theater remember it as that sort of seedy second-run movie house. And time marches on. So in 1958, it closed. There's a lot of reasons the space is still here. There were actually 10 theaters on Main Street in Lynchburg at one point, and this is the only remaining one. And in the 1970s, there was a group that had the space turned into a national landmark. And if you come over the Fifth Street Bridge into Lynchburg from Amherst County, you see the road curves away from the building. And the reason that is because the highway department had to change their plans. And they actually had to go around the building because it had become a national landmark. So that saved the building in the 1970s. In the 1990s, a windstorm blew the fly tower in. And so the theater was exposed to the elements for a number of months, and a community group worked to raise funds to seal the space up so that it could be eventually restored. And that along with age, made the theater so damaged that it made it a really major restoration project for us to take on. Present moment effort to revitalize this theater, I think I would say go back to 1999 when the Academy of Music, a nonprofit organization, was founded. And that later merged with the Fine Arts Center, the Lynchburg Fine Arts Center. That organization became what we are today. It was the Academy of Fine Arts at one point. 4 years ago, we changed the name and revised the mission and made it the Academy Center of the Arts. We finished fundraising in 2015, And the restoration efforts went underway full force in 2015 and then opened December of 2018. And 60 years went by, and the theater was not in use and then back in use after 60 years. And my father is a theater historian, funny enough. And when I was a kid, he got involved in this project. He ended up on the board of the Academy of Music nonprofit organization. And I remember that period, and that was around the time too the Fly Tower blew in, so I have some memories of driving over the Fifth Street Bridge and being able to see into the theater from the road, which was a really crazy thing, just see into this theater from a bridge. But as a kid, I came into the theater. I have some pretty, distinct, vivid memories of walking in there with my father, and there was something really beautiful about the space in a really ghostly way. And it really felt at that point like some sort of haunted space. It's a very surreal thing for me to think about that memory, because as a child, the idea that now in my career I would be here running it as an operational theater and it looks the way it looks now would have been really beyond my imagination at that point. But and it's neat. My father is still here, and he gets to see the space now and enjoy it after all those years too. And so it's been a really special connection for my father and I too.
That's kind of like surreal.
Yeah, it's really weird actually. And I left. I left Amherst County and the Lynchburg area to go to college when I was 18, and I really left this place in the rearview mirror. I really had no intention of coming back. And, it's a winding story that got me back here, but being back here now is one of the most rewarding parts of my career and my life. I think when a building like this, to see what that space looked like, I really view this building very often as a really interesting metaphor for the city and the community. And I think that, and its path has really been a path that has also followed the story of downtown Lynchburg, just in terms of all of it. From 1905, when there was this desire to be a metropolitan area of significance, and there was this real belief that arts and culture was a means of lifting, sort of the self-esteem of a community and a city. And this space became, and it made sense that it did, something sits for 60 years, and it looked like it looked. It was, just really, I can't even, it's night and day, the way that the space looks now. And I think there became a narrative that it was impossible, that it was not going to happen. And that was a common public narrative among many. And I will even admit for myself, having been in and out of the city over the years, it was a narrative that I think I kind of bought into too. I thought, this is impossible. This is this massive multi-million-dollar campaign and restoration effort. I just can't believe that could happen. I started producing site-specific theater here in the city, and so I started really, and in the surrounding community. And so we really started investigating the history of the community, sort of finding out more about it. And I fell in love with this place that I had grown up in a way that I didn't maybe necessarily have that love as much before when I was younger. And I was a teenager, and teenagers always, don't necessarily like where they live. But through that path, I really discovered there was a beauty here, and there was a resilience here, and there were a lot of stories too that were untold. And that was the other thing. We really, as we started diving into creating original works about the community, there were a lot of. Just walking distance from here. Arthur Ashe trained at Whirlwind Johnson's house because the tennis courts in Richmond were segregated. And Althea Gibson trained there too. He had a number of young men and women who came there and trained and learned how to play tennis because his court was a court where they could do that. And that happened here in Lynchburg, right? That's here, and Whirlwind Johnson's great-grandson now is our director of community outreach. There's just all this really cool stuff that we should just be really, really proud of. This space became, to me, really emblematic of something that was representative of what, who we were, what was possible. And I was not alone. Like, there were a number of people that really felt that this had to happen, because if it didn't, that was the narrative of our city, right? That we couldn't do it, that it was not possible. And we were not gonna let that happen, right? The story of the city was not done, and we were gonna be a part of writing the next chapter. So it took a lot of servant leaders here in the community, a lot of our civic leaders here. We have a really special relationship now, all of us do, who went through this. It was a battle. And we changed the narrative. We really started leading people to believe that it was possible, and it was something that we deserved, and something that we could accomplish and we could have. And I think since it's been built, I feel, for myself personally, and I think for a lot of people around me too, that we've redefined what we think we can and cannot do here in this community now. I think that this set a new bar. It was like, look, they can do that. You know, we can do that. It's something that can happen. But it's also been really important for us too, as we do this, that it's maybe even more dynamic than many thought that it would be too. Because we ask ourselves a question a lot about what is community, and what is our community. And that's going to be a continual journey for this organization that is never going to end. But we need to be something for as many people within this community as possible. And there are lots of barriers to that we are continuing to face, but are continuing to work to overcome. And I think that that's been an important thing for our board of directors to grapple with. I think it's been an important thing for our staff to grapple with. Because I think the completion of the space, the profound change that it underwent, needs to be something that's pushed into what happens after, you know, in regards to what the arts can be, how they can galvanize a community, change a community, bring a community together, and also change the identity of a city, right? I mean, I think that, or evolve, I would say. You know, Lynchburg's name is problematic. I think you know, there are a lot of, I think sometimes there's an inferiority complex about the city, and we want to really work to make sure that we are proud of who we are, where we live, but everybody is, not just a few. So I had this personal experience. It was, I had just taken the job, or I was in the first week or two of working here, and I decided I was just going to take kind of a personal journey into the historic theater. I hadn't been in there in a bit. I'd been in there before, but I wanted to come back in. And so I started walking around, and I got lost. And the reason I got lost is because I had gone up and down the segregated stairwell. And the way that it was designed to keep you from accessing certain parts of the theater. And so I got lost because I couldn't re-access parts of the theater I had been in. And it was a really kind of profound moment and experience to kind of not be able to navigate the space, which is a really relatively simple space, because there were these literal barriers that were letting me into the theater. And I went down the segregated stairwell. I knew that it existed and I knew about it, but I think having physically experienced that was something that was profound for me. And on that journey too, I came across Lottie's chair. So Lottie was the ticket taker in the segregated ticket booth at the end of the theater's life. And we know a bit about Lottie, and she's been a way for us to talk about that space and talk a little bit about it and personify it a bit. So her chair was still in the ticket booth too, which was also a really kind of powerful symbol. So I decided to dig into it a little bit more. There have been some news stories and done on it in the efforts over the years, so I didn't have to start from scratch. And I was able to get in touch with a couple of community members who had spoken to individuals in the past who had experienced the segregated space. And people are getting older. There's not a lot of individuals still alive. So I got on the phone with an older woman, and we were talking, and I wanted to find out about her memories of it. And the first thing she said to me was, well, I went into that theater a couple times, but that wasn't our theater. Our theater was, and there was another theater, I think it might have been up on 5th Street. She said, but we would go there occasionally if there was an artist that my parents wanted to see. And so I have some memories of being on that. But that statement of that wasn't our theater really echoed for me and stayed with me, and it was something that we brought into the room. We started talking about opening this facility in this space. We felt that it was our civic duty that we needed to be a space for everybody. So we felt that it was our civic duty really to make sure that we were addressing this, because if there were still individuals in the community who remembered that and would have a statement that that wasn't our theater, then we had to do something about that. So we started talking about the programming. We started talking about not just the programming for opening the theater, but also the programming leading up to the theater. And so we did a lot of things. We started a concert series in our park. We brought George Clinton. There was just a bunch of things that we were sort of doing to really, and even the month before the theater opened, we had Ghostface Killer here. There's just a lot of things that we were kind of doing, right, to sort of say, hey, this is, we want to redefine the age demographic that's engaging with us, but also we also want to take a look at sort of what people think this is, right? So as we opened the theater, we thought we need to recognize that this is the first time that the space will be integrated. I mean, that's a really rare occurrence in 2019. And it's an interesting conversation to have in this moment in time, too. We feel that the arts should be a place where people are having conversations, tackling tough issues. And we had an opportunity to shine a light on some of the cultural heritage of our own city that maybe wasn't necessarily always in the spotlight. So Ann Spencer's granddaughter is still here, and Ann Spencer's house is still here. Ann Spencer was part of a brilliant poet, was part of the Harlem Renaissance. When Martin Luther King Jr. visited here, he stopped at her home to visit her. I mean, it's a really important home. We had her here. We gave an award in Lottie's name, who'd been the ticket taker. That was an award that went to an individual who was unheralded, who was providing access for people to the arts. And this was all really important part of the night. Leland Melvin, who's an area celebrity in many ways, is an astronaut from here. Was the MC for the night. So it was and Mavis Staples was the headliner that evening. And we just really felt that this was a night that we needed to celebrate, but also have a conversation. There are lots of barriers, a lot of them, some of them cultural, some of them economic, to people coming and engaging with the facility. And so we're constantly working to try to overcome that and find ways to build bridges. There's a lot of opportunity here in downtown for it to really be a cultural center for the city. And work has been happening for the last couple decades on that, and it's finally really hit a tipping point. There are particular pockets in downtown, particularly down on the riverfront, where there's been a lot of development, a lot of restaurants. There was a major renovation of a historic hotel that's just 2 blocks up from us, the Virginian Hotel, that just completed and happened. And we are on an end of downtown that is one of the kind of final pieces that needs to be connected to the rest of the development of downtown. And so this is really key. This is another reason, too, that we feel we have a really important place in conversation and dialogue, because if this is going to be revitalized and it's going to happen, if it's actually going to be something healthy, and I think for the entire community, then we need everybody coming and engaging downtown. We need everybody doing it, not just, and this is also our rural surrounding communities too, that they also view that this is a place that they should be coming to, they should be going to restaurants, visiting retail, the downtowns are the hearts of cities. I think when you visit a city, if that downtown is thriving and doing well, then you feel like there's something sort of culturally happening that's viable. The goal of the restoration of the theater was to take it back to 1912. So the architects and the contractors were working with that in mind. A part of the project was historic tax credits, and so it's also adhering to Department of Historic Resources rules and demands, which really makes the space unique, but also makes it historically accurate to a point. And the reason it's to a point is there's no surviving pictures of the inside of the theater. They were lost in a fire. There's a lot of fire stories. We spent a lot of time in our strategic planning thinking about what it was to fill an 800-seat theater. But I think we took for granted very often in that what it was to also have this really special, unique space to see a performance in. And everybody who comes to the space for the first time, there is something that happens for them when they walk in there. And the fact too that we opened in 2018 allowed us to, it's brand new. So it's also, it's like a time machine. It's pretty incredible to go into that room. In the space, UB Blake performed here, Douglas Fairbanks, Martha Graham, John Philip Sousa. It was a stop-off place for a lot of major touring artists. In the last year, we've had Mavis Staples here. We've had Wynton Marsalis and Lincoln Center Jazz. We've had Bela Fleck, the banjo player. We have had Brian McKnight, the R&B artist. We have had we have Ira Glass coming from This American Life. So it's been really exciting. It's been neat to have this return to bringing artists of note to the city. So I think that it's also not just helping in this moment to sort of change the narrative that we have artists come here, but also helping people rediscover what we've already got, which I think has also been really important. So we'll have these moments where we also have artists, our local area artists at points to open for some of these acts. And that's a really great moment for a collision of both national artists of note and individual artists here in the community that can shine. So I've had moments in the theater's operations where I've had moments where I've sat in the theater and enjoyed the performance, and that I think is a very specific experience that's about what I'm going through and then what the artist is sharing, and that could maybe happen anywhere. It's very special though that it's happening here in my hometown, and so that I will sort of after the moment sort of think, oh my God, like I just had this like really incredible experience, seeing Postmodern Jukebox, here do this incredible thing here in my hometown. So I've come because I've just to see what was going on, and I've stood in the back of the theater, and it'll be Second City, let's say, is up on stage, and the audience is laughing and having this incredible time, and I look around the space and I see this facility done. And people in the room, and the space that as a little kid I walked into, and it looked like a bomb had gone off. And the idea that years later, this the dreams of so many would actually come to fruition, and it's really surreal. I have moments where I really kind of pinch myself. But we feel it together as a team. I think that's what's also really special about Here and Now. It's our board worked really hard to make this happen. Our staff has worked really hard, and so it's a special moment here. I like to be surprised, and I think that this is a really surprising moment in Lynchburg. And I think some things that I already knew existed were that it is nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains in an incredibly beautiful place with a river that runs through it, and it has unique architecture and is really gorgeous on all kinds of levels. But it is really moving through a renaissance right now. There are some incredible restaurants that have been opening up all around downtown. We are part of a few other institutions too that are bringing cultural life back to the community. And we continually hear from people when they come, because they come for an artist. So they came because John Heder, and we were showing Napoleon Dynamite, and he's here talking about it, and people came and they're like, oh my God, I had no idea that this was in Lynchburg, right? That I can eat, at Gray's up the hill, it's an incredible restaurant, and that I can wander down here, see this, I can stay at the Virginian Hotel. I think people are surprised, and I think we need more surprises in our life where we're caught off guard and our perceptions are changed. And I think that's a moment here for Lynchburg.